So let's see if we're inside of ZBrush. You're in a creature creation class, and let's say we want to kind of just do something on the fly. Let me check with you guys. How long does it take you to kind of, let's say, rough in a base sculpt, a base character? How long do you spend? An hour, a day, a week, 3 hours for a creature. Christian spends an hour. How about you guys? How about 3 to 5 hours? Kristen? 30, 40 minutes for a rough. There's another thing I think is really kind of important for us to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at masters. Did I get rid of this? Like, say, Carlos Fuentes, or somebody like that. One of the key things that we want to be learning when we're artists, we want to learn these strategies that kind of help us get things done quickly and that also kind of open us up for a whole bunch of creative potential. And one of the things that I've started to kind of make a distinction about in terms of artists and those of us who are learning, you know, we all look at Carlos Fuentes or we look at these master artists and we just think, oh my God, the work is so amazing. I love what they're doing. And I just wish I could kind of be there, get there at that kind of level. And then when you talk to the artists like I have, they're just like, geez, man, it's like, God, I wish I could change this. I wish I could change that. And then they're looking and they're saying, oh, I wish I could be at the level of this artist or that artist. I want to be like, Frank Frazetta, or let's say I want to be like Bouguereau, or I'd like to be like, any of these different artists. And then if you were to be able to cue these guys like Frank Frazetta or Bouguereau, from the 18th, 19th century, let's say, there would be somebody else that they wanted to kind of be like. And so as we are learning, we're always at these kind of, basically, each time you grow, you just are able to see farther. So as you're learning your skills, you're pulling skills in, but your eye is one of those things that's growing, and it is now able to see farther and how much more you have to go. So it can be really daunting to kind of be learning and always seeing further and further and further and further where you need to go. But one of the things that I've noticed with artists that have kind of reached a certain level, it's not that they're these magic magicians or anything else like this. It's that they've just kind of mastered their strategies and their workflow. So in my view, a lot of mastering art is really about mastering process and mastering how you do something, how you approach something, and getting that down to where you're able to get predictable kind of results. So if I was to, say, decide to start sculpting, what's the design aesthetic that you guys have going right now? Is it the insect, or are we doing something else? What's the theme that you're working on right now? Let's see if I can work within that real quick. Marcos, Dragon, Snake, just Behemoth. We could do whatever we wanted, just really big boss. So Simon. Okay, so the theme we have is a really big boss, something just very large that's going to kind of crush something else, right? So what animal do you think of when you hear that? Dinosaurs. Definitely dinosaurs. Although, they're just birds now, right? Gorilla, elephant, dinosaur, bears. Elephants are a little bit too nice, I think. but that depends on if you're in a village next to a pissed off one. So if we were to say start to kind of design something, I don't know what your guys' process would be, but I'll start with something like a sphere, for example. And now I'm going to start to kind of, let me see if I can do a little demo and pull together some of my thinking on all the stuff I've said earlier about how to pick up anatomy clues and things like that, and see if I can start to kind of tweak that for us here. Is that okay? You guys okay if I do a demo, or if there's anything else that you would really like me to do, let me know. Let me just stop for a second and get your feedback. Yeah? All right, so we have the idea of a behemoth. And I have a certain workflow I use a lot. It's just the maquette workflow, and it uses insert spheres. So I can use that, but then I also can just pull this thing out and start to Dynamesh this and see what I can kind of come up with. But I'm going to just delete my subdivision levels, and maybe I lower it and delete higher. So when I start sculpting, you know, I've got this question. Do I start with the head? Do I start with the body? You know, where is this thing going to kind of go? But if it's a creature, I'll probably start the whole thing. I'll probably start with a torso. And so with the behemoth kind of character, probably wise to tilt him forward, get him aggressive in some way, not tilting him back and kind of, you know, putting his head back there like he's kind of wary, but we're going to make him kind of aggressive, pitch him forward, and do something where he's kind of right there, kind of in your face. And for some reason I'm thinking bear, but I don't really know where it's going to go. So we're going to pitch this guy kind of forward. I'm going to try to make a distinction between his ribs and his pelvis. And then definitely, I'm right now thinking about C7. That's a big form. So there's the sacrum, there's the lumbar, thoracic, and then C7 that goes into the neck. And then in a behemoth, or in say a dinosaur, C7 are the whole cervical vertebrae and part of the part of the thoracic. They have these long spinous processes on their on the spine itself. So the spine will be like this little tiny bone, this big process. Process just means, you know, bony point. I'll occasionally just mask something out so I can move form without screwing anything else up. And if I want, I can start to Dynamesh, but I usually lower that, much lower than that. Okay, that's fine, 16. Say mask out some legs. Now, when you're doing this, what's your energy like? Here I am, I'm sculpting this guy, and he's in this kind of neutral pose, and I'm really just kind of trying to get some anatomy that would kind of work in some basic kind of form. What's my energy like on this guy? How am I feeling? How do you guys feel when you're sitting here just trying to kind of get some basic dude, and now I'm looking at his butt like, you know, does he got a no butt, or does he got a butt? Things of that nature. And I would just Dynamesh it and go from there. What's your feeling of this guy so far? He's kind of adorable, yeah. Now, how many of you have been at this process, you're sculpting, and now suddenly your energy starts to waver, let's say. You're like not sure, you get a little bit like, oh, it's kind of, you know, I'm not really sure where it's going, I'm not sure it's aggressive, is he a behemoth, or is he like, you know, an adorable behemoth? But who's had their energy kind of, it doesn't mean that you go away, and it doesn't mean that you haven't learned to cope with it, but who's had their energy waver here? Where they had just a moment of doubt. You might have dealt with the doubt, and you might be totally comfortable with that now, but have you had that moment of doubt? Simon's had it. Marcos, yeah. So this is part of process, procedure, right? And in some cases, we've got to deal with this. Like we have to do it in a T-pose, so we're going to have to deal with this, and we know this kind of stuff in advance. But we don't have to deal with it every single time. It's not something that we have to deal with every single time. And so we can get a little bit more unleashed, so to speak, on this, and see if we can kind of be sculpting what we're feeling and pushing that from an artistic perspective. But we got to make one change. What do you think is probably the one thing that's really making my energy waver right now? There's really just one thing making my energy waver, making me a little bit uncomfortable. It's important to think about this stuff, and I've spent a large part of my life thinking about this. Why did my energy waver? How do I do it so my energy doesn't waver? If my energy is not wavering, do I get a better result? Because I've taught a lot of these things in front of people, and if my energy wavers, I'm kind of screwed, because I've got all this pressure. I'm in front of like 1,000 people or something like that, or it's online, and it's going to be seen by 1,000, 2,000 people. Energy becomes really important. So anybody got any thoughts? Just give me a yes, no, or if you have a thought, let me know.